Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Fix Computers. Today we're doing a build, so it's actually a Let's Build Computers. We're going to be putting all of this stuff into this fella down here. So this is going to be a complete build. I'm going to show everything in all the gory details, so let's get on with it. Step one is to unbox and prepare the case. So let's get this thing. No, I'm going to do that on the floor, abandon that. Get this thing ready. So this is basically just a matter of removing all the packaging and all the rest of it. So I'm just going to cut this thing open. Okay, so what we've got here is a Coolmaster CM693 case, which is one of their really nice ones actually. I think this is a really tasteful case. It's got a little bit of design on it just so it's a bit more than just a black box. And also it's got the windowed side panel, and I think windows are underrated. They used to be all the rage and they've sort of gone out of fashion these days because people can't be bothered to make the insides look nice anymore. So we're going to take the side panel off of this and just prep the interior. Okay, so in here we've got a selection of cables already. We'll just unwind these, take out the silica gel. Right, so we've got USB 3 here. We've got a couple of USBs there. We've got the front panel audio, and these will be the front panel LEDs and switches and indicators and stuff like that. Also in this, we've got a rear fan. That's got a 3-pin connector with a 4-pin adapter on it. And what else have we got? This is what I'm looking for. In this hard drive bay, we've got a box. Right, okay, so in here, this box, we've got an array of screws and fittings. Whoop. We've also got some rubber feet. These are probably noise dampening stuff to fit to your fans and things like that, and your drives. And we'll also have the most important bit that we need, the motherboard standoffs. These standoffs are what we'll screw the motherboard onto that just hold it a little ways into the case. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to fit the power supply to the bottom, and then we can start planning the cables for that. Then the motherboard goes in. Okay, so the power supply we're fitting, this is a EVGA NEX 750B. It's a 750 watt semi-modular power supply, and these EVGA power supplies, these are really underrated. These have actually got Seasonic internals in them, and Seasonic are actually quite a premium brand of power supply. They're very high quality and quite often quite expensive as well. But the EVGA stuff, same electronics, just a slightly more budget brand on it. And as you can see, this one actually looks pretty badass. It's got this weird kind of effect on it. I quite like the look of that. So semi-modular means that the main power cables, like the ATX power cable and things like that, these are fixed cables, while all the accessories and ancillaries, those are all modular. Now personally, I prefer semi-modular because let's face it, what computer doesn't have these cables fitted? I don't see the point in paying extra for fully modular for cables that you are always going to have connected. So you can save a bit of money just by going semi. So we're going to fit this to the bottom, and let me see, I'm going to go for, let's just see which way up works best. This case does have an invertible power supply bay, so you can mount it any way up. The two ways of doing it are, we can have it this way up, in which case the fan is on the bottom and it will be drawing air in from underneath the case. The advantage of this is it's bringing in cold air rather than warm air from inside the case. But the disadvantage is that A, it's not functioning as another exhaust fan, and B, it's also going to suck up a lot of dust from underneath the case. So for that reason, I'm actually going to turn this one over and go for the other way up, because personally I think that will improve the overall reliability of the computer. In reality there's probably nothing in it, but whatever, that's just what I'm doing. So okay, so let's get this power supply screwed in from the back. I'm not going to bother adjusting the camera for this because there's not much to see. It's 4 screws in and then we're done. Right, I've just piloted all the screws. Now I'm just going to support the power supply just to make sure that that's sitting comfortably as I tighten all of those screws up. There we go. Being a 750 watt power supply, this should be the last one the computer ever needs. It's probably a little bit over-spec'd. Personally, I question, unless you're running unless you're running a serious amount of hardware in your computer, I don't believe that any computer really needs more than a 500 or 600 watt. However, with a little bit of overspecking with this 750, we just know that this computer is not going to want any more power for its lifetime. So let's take off that thread, and these ones here are, let me see, we've got the ATX power supply, we've got the auxiliary CPU power supply, and we've got a single graphics card 6 or 8 pin connector. So all of these I'm just going to feed straight through this hole here and just get them straight out of sight to the back of the case. Right, that's that, and I've just brought them up the front there just so I'm not trapping them underneath the case while we're working on it. So next thing is we want to get the motherboard in there, so that's in position. Right, first part of the motherboard is the back panel, which goes in there. Reason for this is obviously every motherboard has a different arrangement of ports on the back of it, so you get one of these little tin plates that just gives you the correct cover to fit to your case. Okay, now the motherboard we're using here, this is a Gigabyte, it's a GA990 FXA UD3, which is one of Gigabyte's, I would call this premium, but not top end. These cost around, a decent motherboard costs between £100 and £150, and for that you get all solid capacitors. Every single capacitor on here is a solid state one, except for, I mean, we've got a couple of electrolytics down here. This will be stuff like the audio and that sort of thing, stuff that doesn't matter. Anything that's actually handling significant power regulation, so either power to the PCI Express or power to the CPU, that's all solid, and that means it will take a lot more abuse before it fails. Then in addition to that, as you can see, we've got this lovely black PCB with the gunmetal grey heatsinks on it, so it looks nice as well. Now, if you spend big bucks on your motherboard, you can get stuff like Asus Republic of Gamers gear. However, I'll be frank, I don't like big expensive motherboards like that. I'm not saying they're bad, I just don't think they're worth the money. I actually had a big argument with a friend, well, it wasn't a big argument, it was a discussion with a couple of friends about this the other day, and the Republic of Gamers motherboards and similar ones, they come with a lot of bells and whistles. They come with loads of toys that allow you to do they make overclocking easier, you can connect monitoring equipment to them and things like that. But I contend that the vast majority of people never use these features, and you end up paying anything up to twice the price for stuff that you just don't really need. So that's my opinion on that. That's one of the reasons why we're not going in with a big expensive £300 motherboard here. This cost about £140, and personally that's as much as I would want to spend on a motherboard. The advantage of this one over something that cost about $120 is that this has got a lot of high power USB ports and stuff on the back. So these red USBs, these will kick out like 2 or 3 amps, I think, so they'll quick charge your phone, that kind of thing. So we've got to offer this up and see what additional screw points need fitting. There will be 1 or 2 motherboard standoffs already in the case, however, not all of them will be fitted. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we need 9 total, and as we can see they are all in straight rows, which makes them quite easy to spot, except for that one which is always offset. So let's just take that back out again, and we'll fit standoffs to the points where they're needed. The motherboard standoffs you want to take just a little bit tighter than what you'd consider normal for a computer screw, because there's nothing worse than when you undo a motherboard screw and you can feel the standoff turning underneath it. So I'm usually just a little bit more vicious with standoffs. However, you've got to balance it, because if you go too tight you will just strip the thread. Because unfortunately, even on a premium computer case, this back panel, that will just be stamped tin or stamped steel. So they're not the strongest things in the world, so be a little bit gentle. So I'm just lining up the back connectors first. something to look out for is sometimes, this one doesn't have any, but sometimes you'll see little flaps sticking out from the I/O plate. And what that is, those are grounding strips, just to make sure that the case is contacting the ports of the motherboard. Make sure that those don't poke into the ports. The amount of times I've seen computers that have been built and you can just see the ports have been blocked by those grounding strips poking into the ports. So just watch out for that. And just settle it so those ports are lined up nicely, and just line it up so that it's lining up with the holes. I've missed a standoff there. One of my standoffs is in the wrong place. Out we go. No, it's worse than that. What's actually happened is I've put the standoff in too tight and it's sheared. So I just need to unscrew the remnants of the thread from the back of the case. That is why we don't tighten computer screws too tightly. Thankfully, the vast majority of cases, this one included, always come with spares, so it's not a big deal. We've just removed that sheared thread and we'll put a new one in, and we won't tighten it up too much. Okay, right, let's do that again. Right. Sometimes when fitting motherboards, the I/O plate will be fairly vicious, and you'll find that none of your screws line up as standard, and you have to actually physically hold the motherboard in place. Thankfully, this center standoff is very helpful, that it actually sits up slightly into the hole, so it's holding the motherboard in place. So now what we can do is we can now screw that in without having to hold it in. Now I'm just going to check which thread these standoffs are using. Sometimes they're coarse and sometimes they're fine. These are definitely fine thread, so we'll get 9 fine thread screws. Tell you what I'd like to see. I'd like to see a motherboard where they don't write all of the specifications all over it like a shopping list wherever there's space. They're all like this, and I think they would look prettier if they just left the PCB blank. Okay, that's our motherboard in place. That's nice and solid. Right, so next thing, CPU power line, which is this fella. This needs to go around the back of the case and up to here. So we're going to go upright and get that connected. I tell you what, that's just long enough. We got lucky there. Right, we'll do the the ATX power line while we're here as well. I'm going to bring that in from the top. The actual connector is about there, which is closer to this one, but I'm going to bring it in from the top because it buries more of this spare cable. Right, and the VGA one, that's going to come in probably around the midpoint, maybe low. I'm going to put that in the low point, I think. Just tie that off like that, and that's just pinning this to the back. Okay. Look at that. Look at that. And then the CPU cable, that can just bend over. It is worth noting, despite my remarks about this power supply, that if you were to pay extra for the really expensive power supplies, the braiding would go all the way to the end of the cables, or you'd have individually braided cables, that kind of thing, which would look a little bit nicer than this. However, the thing is, this computer was built on a budget. The budget was 4 figures, but it was still on a budget. And the thing is, by saving these little bits of money here and there, that's how we managed to get it up to a GTX 970 and things like that, and the top-end CPU that we're going to put in. So, if you want to know why I'm not going for the top everything, these are the reasons. I'll make little concessions here and there if it means that we can afford to get that next notch up on the actual spec, which is where it counts at the end of the day. Right, that's in place. Let's get in these other little extras while we've got space for them. So where's our USB 3? There's our USB 3. So that's going to come down the bottom, that's going to come in this bottom port. Right, the front USBs, exactly the same deal, they're going along to here. So we'll bring them up through the bottom of the case. See, let's go for that one there. We'll just pull the excess back. There'll be a cluster of wires behind the computer at the moment, and what we'll do, we'll deal with all of those later when everything is connected. Right, for the front audio, you get two connectors, AC97 and HD audio. The rule of thumb is AC97 for AMD, HD audio for Intel. The reality is most modern sound cards will map to whatever pins you connect, but we'll follow the convention anyway. So I'm just going to twist that up to make it a bit tidier. And then what we'll do, we'll just twist that back on itself and tuck that down right along the back of the board. And we'll just tuck that down there, and that just disappears from sight. Okay, right, next we're going to fit the front panel connectors, and then that gets rid of all these little loose cables we've got kicking about. Once again, I'm going to bring these up through the bottom, so we'll just reroute those. Hard drive, power switch, reset switch, and power LED. The reason why the power LED is always split is that on some motherboards, some stupid motherboards, they have a 3-pin arrangement, so you have to divide the two pins up. There we go.